The world stood still. In a clearing dusted with the first light snow of winter, two predators locked eyes. The air, crisp and cold, held its breath. Every bird fell silent. Every rustle of leaves ceased. It was a moment stretched thin, pulled taut like a bowstring, ready to snap. One was a flash of red fur, a creature of cunning and shadow. The other was a tower of gray muscle, a ghost of the ancient woods. They saw each other across the 20 paces of frosted ground. There was no surprise, only a cold, hard recognition. This was a challenge. This was a battle for territory, for respect, for life itself. The forest was their arena, and the silent snow-laden pines were the only witnesses to what was about to unfold. Neither animal moved a muscle, yet everything was happening. The fox's ears, black-tipped and sharp, swiveled, catching every phantom sound. The fox was a creature of fire and wit. His name was Reynard, and his coat was the color of a dying autumn leaf, a brilliant fiery red that stood out against the pale snow. He was not a large animal. From the tip of his pointed black nose to the base of his magnificent white-tipped tail, he was perhaps only a meter long. He was lean, built for speed and silence, not for brute force. Reynard's greatest weapon was his mind. His eyes, the color of polished amber, missed nothing. They were constantly scanning, calculating, and learning. He knew every inch of this territory. He knew which streams were frozen solid and which still held a treacherous current beneath a thin sheet of ice. This forest was his chessboard, and he was its grandmaster, always thinking 3 moves ahead of his prey and his rivals. But do not mistake his cunning for cowardice. Reynard possessed a fierce and fiery spirit that matched his vibrant coat. When cornered, he was a whirlwind of defiant energy. The wolf was a force of nature carved from stone and shadow. His name was Grimfang, and he was the epitome of wild power. His fur was a thick, coarse coat of grizzled gray and black, perfect camouflage for the deep woods and the twilight hours he preferred to hunt in. He was immense. His paws were the size of a human hand, tipped with thick, non-retractable claws that gripped the earth like cleats, giving him incredible traction as he ran. Grimfang's personality was as direct and uncompromising as his physical form. He was a creature of instinct and dominance. He was the alpha of his pack, though he was hunting alone today. His yellow eyes, cold and intelligent, held the wisdom of generations of successful hunters. They were not cruel, but they were utterly without pity. His primary weapons were his jaws. Grimfang's head was large and powerful, filled with 42 teeth designed for a specific and deadly purpose. The 20 paces of no man's land disappeared in a storm of flying snow. Grimfang the wolf covered the ground with enormous, powerful strides. Each bound was a display of raw, explosive energy, his massive body propelled forward like a missile. The ground trembled slightly under his weight. A deep, guttural snarl tore from his throat, a sound of pure aggression that rolled across the clearing. He was a battering ram, a living weapon of destruction. Reynard the fox, however, had other plans. He ran not with power, but with a fluid, weaving grace. He was lower to the ground, a streak of crimson lightning against the white canvas of the snow. He didn't run in a straight line. He jinked left, then right, his movements erratic and unpredictable. His survival depended on not being where the wolf expected him to be. His mind was racing as fast as his legs, calculating the wolf's speed, trajectory, and the precise moment they would meet. The charge was not a mad dash, it was a carefully choreographed dance of evasion. They met in the center of the clearing. It was not the bone-shattering crash Grimfang had intended. Just as the wolf lunged, jaws agape and ready to snap, Reynard did something extraordinary. He dropped. He didn't just duck, he threw his entire body flat against the snow, sliding on the thin layer of ice beneath. The wolf's massive form sailed over him, a gray shadow passing inches above his head. Before Grimfang could land and turn, Reynard was already back on his feet. He had used the wolf's own momentum against him. The charge was over, and the first move had gone to the fox. Reynard's gamble paid off. As Grimfang struggled to turn his heavy body in the slippery snow, the fox saw his chance. He was a flash of red, darting in with incredible speed. He leaped and snapped, his needle-sharp teeth sinking into the wolf's hind leg just above the hock. It wasn't a deep wound, not enough to cripple the massive animal, but it was sharp and shocking. Reynard bit down, tore a small gash in the wolf's thick hide, and immediately sprang back, putting distance between them before the inevitable retaliation. First blood had been drawn, and it belonged to the fox. Grimfang let out a roar of pure fury, a sound mixed with pain and outrage. He whipped his head around, his yellow eyes blazing with a new, more focused intensity. He no longer saw a mere nuisance, he saw a genuine threat. The wolf began to anticipate the fox's movements. He started using his body to corner Reynard, cutting off his escape routes. He herded the fox towards a thicket of dense pine trees, limiting his space to maneuver. Reynard felt his energy beginning to wane. His strategy of 1,000 cuts was taking its toll, not just on the wolf, but on himself. His lungs burned from the cold air, and his muscles ached. The fox, trapped against a large fallen log, knew he was in trouble. Grimfang was closing in, his steps slow and deliberate, his yellow eyes glowing with certainty. There was nowhere left to run. Reynard's mind raced, searching for one last trick, one final gamble. As Grimfang gathered himself for the final pounce, the fox did the unexpected. He ran directly towards the wolf. Just before he reached the wolf's snapping jaws, Reynard leaped. Not at the wolf, but onto the fallen log. From this small height advantage, he launched himself again, not at the wolf's body, but at his head. Reynard's leap was a masterpiece of desperation. He landed squarely on Grimfang's broad shoulders, a shocking weight and a flurry of motion that the wolf was not prepared for. For a moment the wolf was stunned by the audacity of the attack, but the wolf's power was absolute. With a furious roar, Grimfang shook his massive head and neck. The force was incredible, like a small earthquake. Reynard, for all his agility, could not hold on. That second was all Grimfang needed. The wolf was on him in an instant. He slammed one of his massive front paws down onto the fox's back, pinning him to the ground. The fight was over. Grimfang the wolf was the clear and undisputed winner. The primary reason for his victory was his overwhelming physical advantage. In a direct confrontation between two predators, sheer power and size are often the deciding factors. However, it was not just brute force that secured Grimfang's win, it was his strength combined with his experience and adaptability. He learned quickly, adapting his strategy from a simple, overwhelming assault to a tactical herding maneuver. Reynard's defeat was not due to a lack of courage or intelligence. In fact, he fought brilliantly, using every tool at his disposal. However, his smaller size and lesser stamina were ultimately his downfall. The confrontation between Reynard and Grimfang was more than just a fight. It was a story written in the snow, a perfect illustration of the roles these animals play in their ecosystem. We learn that the wild is not a simple place of strong versus weak. It is a complex tapestry of different survival strategies. It teaches us to respect the unique abilities of every animal, from the smallest shrew to the largest bear. As the snow gently erases the signs of the struggle, the forest returns to its quiet rhythm. The ultimate animal face-off between the fox and the wolf concludes with a clear winner, but it leaves us with a deeper appreciation for both. The law of the wild is harsh, but it is also beautiful in its own uncompromising way.